Did the fantasy gods smile in your favor in week 15? I really hope so because it's playoff time at this point. You know what? They may not be a next week. If you are surviving and you're going on, hopefully on your way to a championship, you're still going to need help. Let's face it. Every week, the injuries continue to roll in, and there are still some exciting new names that you might want to pick up on the waiver wire. So let's figure out who could help you in week 16. First, if you could help us out, all you got to do is click that subscribe button if you haven't already. All of you who have, thank you so much. We got over 95,000 so far, but we want to get to 100K hopefully before season's over. So if you haven't yet, click that subscribe button. We appreciate it. Before we get to the waiver wire options, got to start with injuries. One team whose luck has definitely run out. It is Kansas City Chiefs. Hard to imagine. They are not even in the playoffs, much less going for another Super Bowl. And it got much worse, much worse for Chiefs fans because late in that game, Pat Mahomes, not only injured, done for this season, they suspect, a torn ACL, possible MCL as well. So now we got the beginning of next season in question. I mean, it just has all come crashing down here for Kansas City. But here's the thing for fantasy, Mahomes out. Now you definitely have to have some questions about the viability of all of these pass catchers. Gardner Minshew, come on. Like, this is not the kind of quarterback you want throwing to your number one receiver, Rashee Rice, your tight end, Travis Kelce. So there's some question marks going forward, but no question about Mahomes. He is done. And then Xavier Worthy also left early in that game, suspected concussion. We'll have to keep an eye on his status. I mean, this is just a brutal week overall for Chiefs. And sadly, those weren't the only big name injuries. So Devontae Adams was questionable heading into the week, but seems like it was fine. The hamstring wasn't enough to keep him out. Maybe it should have, because late in that game, he pulled up very obviously the same injury. And so if this is a re-aggravation of the same hamstring, yeah, you bet he might miss this week just in time for your, semifinal and maybe championship for fantasy, a guy who'd been leading the NFL in receiving touchdowns. We'll have to see exactly how bad it is, but don't be surprised if you're without Devontae Adams for the next week or two. His fantasy season actually could even be over. Now, usually the rookie running backs are the ones that can help lead the way during the postseason because they start to come on late in the season, and that was the case with RJ Harvey, and he'd been rolling, even scored a touchdown in this game. But then late, we heard that he suffered a rib injury, and so now all of a sudden we got to worry, are we going to have him next week? And a guy who was in the smash spot as well. I mean, who knows? Maybe it would have been the week for Woody Marks to have his real coming out performance. I mean, he had one good game early in the season. It kind of disappeared. He's been okay, but man, such a smash spot. And then whether you decide that was a touchdown or a fumble recovery, whatever they're doing with that weird scoring on that play, it's just really strange. But yeah, he didn't do anything after that because he left again. Seriously, Woody Marks, it's becoming a meme at this point. He's injured every week in practice, in the game. He left again. Now, there's two issues here. So first of all, DeMeco Ryans head coach said he could have come back, right? Like, this wasn't that serious, making it sound like it's not a big deal. And PFF's Nathan Janke even says, you know what, don't bother picking up the backup Jawar Jordan because it doesn't seem like Marks is going to be out. But the problem is that they didn't bring Marks in because Jawar Jordan looked so good. I'll talk about him a little bit later, though. For now, you still have to wonder, is Woody Marks ever going to just actually stay healthy? But if there was one injury that was less shocking than Woody Marks, it's Christian Watson. I know, it's sad, but it was just inevitable, right? Not a good matchup, so you're glad you didn't start him in this game against the Broncos, but then now you got to wonder, is he going to play next week? Because, yes, Christian Watson, believe it or not, is hurt again on that interception that Pat Surtain snatched out of his hands. Well, Watson landed on his shoulder. It looked like it was clearly the shoulder, but they're calling it a chest injury. Either way, he was down for a while, clearly in pain, and it's Christian Watson, a.k.a. Mr. Glass. So let's just do this again and watch the injury report. And for what it's worth, Matthew Golden, promising young rookie who had not done a whole lot, he did get a little bit more involved here in this game. 56 yards on 3 receptions. Despite the tough matchup, but I can't go there. Way too risky to say that you should start him for your fantasy playoffs. Another rookie running back who left early, Devin Neal, just when you thought you could trust him. He did score early, but left early, didn't come back. And so we're going to have to see if that hamstring issue is good enough to keep him out next week. And the Arizona running back, Bam Knight, I think it was the very first play of the game, not only injured the ankle, but was carted off. Arizona, like how many running backs can they go through in a season? there does seem to be a clear next man up here who I'll also talk about in just a minute. And then for the Bears, I mean, it's the wide receivers that they just can't keep on the field. So Roma Dunze, look, for what it's worth, we said no, it's just too risky. You don't want to start him anyways. So hopefully you didn't want or have Odunze in your lineup because he was a literally last minute scratch. Like the games had already basically started and they're like, nope. He was pulled because even though he was technically active for that game right before the game time started, he was a late scratch because something just didn't feel right in warmups. So not a new injury, but that stress fracture in the foot. You got to believe he really wasn't ready for this game physically anyways. And then, well, Luther Burden, I will talk about him in both segments because he stepped up, he had a role, he led the team in receiving, but then he also left with an injury in the third quarter. I mean, who knows how big his game could have been if he had stayed in. So this just brings to mind exactly what I always say is, every day things change in the NFL. So let's keep an eye on Burden and his injury status. He could be a promising pickup or he could just be an avoid. Now let's dive into who the best pickups could be heading into week 16. I know you're in a competitive league, right? At this point, you probably have a pretty deep roster if you're in the playoffs. But that doesn't mean there aren't players who can help. And I will always tell you this, no matter how late in the season it gets, always check the waiver wire because there are some players, even some highly rostered players, some good players that get dropped because somebody needs a backup. They want to handcuff a running back. They need a kicker or whatever it is. Always call the waiver wire and check. So for those of you in more shallow leagues or you're in a league where guys just drop good players, just go out and check. I can't say Tyrone Tracy is a strong waiver wire pickup because of this week because he's already rostered over 80% in most formats, but that doesn't mean there aren't some leagues out there where you could snatch him up. If he's out there, get him. Same thing for Tony Pollard. Look, he did it again, second week in a row, coming off what we thought was a really fluky performance against the Cleveland Browns where he ran for those 2 long touchdowns and just seemed like Cleveland, which now for the second week in a row seems like Cleveland's just stopped tackling altogether. But he had another strong game, another 100-yard rushing game against the Niners. So yeah, at this point, I guess Tony Pollard has decided he is motivated. Still highly rostered, but hey, Ricky Pearsall in that Niners game, finally he showed up, and this is what we're waiting for. He just needed that week off, that rest, right? That must be what it is. He finally looked healthy. He was productive. He led the team with 96 receiving yards on 6 catches. It was Juwan Jennings getting the touchdowns. But, Jennings, yeah, he's going to be more of the red zone threat. That's just what he is, right? Or should I say the end zone threat. But Pearsall seems to have the juice back. This is a productive receiver in a high-octane offense. This was a great matchup. But the schedule is not that bad at all for the 49ers next couple of weeks either. This coming week, San Francisco gets another AFC South opponent in Indianapolis. And man, the Colts, they are the third worst in terms of fantasy points per game allowed to wide receivers. Sauce Gardner, their acquisition, still hurt. And Charvarius Ward, their other starting corner, he is done for the season. So, yeah, this is a great spot again for Ricky Pearsall. Just when you need it most, it might wind up being a high upside flex play. And again, Pearsall didn't just get all of that in one big play. He was the leading target among wide receivers with 7. It's going to continue. I never doubted you, Ricky. Now, to be fair, we did doubt Jacoby Brissett. Why wouldn't we? Going against the Houston Texans, the number 1 defense, hadn't allowed 3 touchdowns to a quarterback all season long until they met Jacoby Brissett. Yeah, not kidding. Jacoby Brissett somehow just defies the odds. He's just going to continue to be Mr. Consistent. Apparently, matchup does not matter. He was fine here, not huge yardage, but he threw 3 touchdowns. Trey McBride had a huge game. Michael Wilson was still fine, so just set and forget, right? Like, who's next? It doesn't matter, obviously. Jacoby Brissett, according to Yahoo scoring, hasn't had less than 18 fantasy points since he became the starter. And if you're curious, it turns out the Cardinals do face the Falcons this week, who start out strong in terms of pass defense, but over the last 8 weeks are bottom 10 against the quarterback for fantasy. And if you're still streaming tight end, let's go back to Oronde Gadsden. Yeah, we'd pretty much left him for dead because he left fantasy teams for dead, right? After a couple of huge games, had done nothing. And look, it was week 9 was the last time that you were actually happy if you started Oronde Gadsden. And it's not like you were bummed out if you had him on the bench in week 15. It was decent, 4 catches, 61 yards, didn't score. But there's signs of life here, but more importantly, is that he was more productive despite being on the field less. So this is slightly paradoxical, I know, but his usage has slightly decreased. There's more of a rotation at tight end here. We got Disley and Fisk and some other tight ends here doing some blocking and, playing different roles on third down. But in that slightly decreased usage, Gadsden has been more efficient and he got targeted. So I think there's some life here, and some players are just more efficient when they're on the field less, but also got QJ being injured here. The other receivers are just not getting a lot of targets. This might be a good spot for Gadsden to do something this coming week. It's going to be the Cowboys. You know how that goes. They score points, they give up points. All right, time for some players who are less likely to be owned in fantasy leagues. Let's get to the running back position. I know you want to know about Bill. It's time for the post-hype. It's been a minute since we even had to think about Bill. Look, Chris Rodriguez was supposed to be the guy here. This was the best spot possible for a running back going against the Giants defense. And then last minute, C-Rod was scratched. So Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt forced into action. And now is he going to force yourself onto your fantasy roster after going 96 yards on the ground and a touchdown? I don't know about that. Look, I'm trying to give it to you real and straight here. Yes, it was a good game, but keep in mind, this is the Giants defense, which again has been by far the worst run defense in the NFL over the past 2 months. And so this was a great spot for any running back. Next week, not so much. Gets that Philadelphia Eagles rush defense, and Rodriguez might actually come back because remember, this was a last-minute game time decision. I cannot, wholeheartedly advocate for Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, but at the same time, if Rodriguez doesn't play, he could have some value. I mean, I hope you don't have to go there for your fantasy semis or championship, but I gotta at least mention it. And the running back who's probably going to draw the most interest because you probably just want to know who he is, Jawhar Jordan for the Houston Texans. As soon as Woody went out, it was Jordan who took the lead role, not fullback Dare Ogunbowale, because he did have a role. He did get a goal line carry, in fact, but it was Jordan who proceeded to do the majority of the work here in terms of not only carrying the ball, but doing the damage. Ran for over 100 yards on the ground. In fact, that's the first 100-yard rushing game by a Houston Texans running back all season. Now, don't blame yourself if you had no idea who Jawhar Jordan was. This is an undrafted free agent who has been on the practice squad for the Houston Texans for the last couple of years, and this was his first actual NFL action in terms of getting carries. This was it. This was basically his debut, years in the making. He made the most of it, let's face it, but this is not an explosive athlete. This is not a guy who we've been kind of waiting for, kind of like, Krosky-Merritt. Everyone just assumes he was going to break out and have a big game. No, this is like a nobody for fantasy purposes. Let's face it, all right? The risk here, you grab Jordan and Woody Marks plays next week, and this is meaningless. So don't think that you've just picked up a league winner if you got Jawhar Jordan here. But if Marks is out, which, again, it's almost a foregone conclusion at some point he'll miss the game or practice. I mean, look, this is not the worst stash. You take a chance. This is a lotto ticket, to be sure. But just, be realistic about your expectations. And on the other hand, we got tried and true Michael Carter. Never the first option for NFL teams, much less the Arizona Cardinals. But he's the last man standing. Bam night, carted off the field. Who knows if he'll come back. Marjon Mercado was back. He was active for this game. He's just not getting any carries. They have relegated him strictly to a passing down role. He's out there on third downs. He'll catch the occasional pass, but they don't want to really put the ball in his hands too much if they can help it. And Michael Carter basically dominated the carries here. 14 carries for 56 yards. No other player other than Brissett, who carried it 3 times, had more than 2 carries. So it was not a big game on the ground. But again, this is the Texans defense. You can't expect that. And he did catch 4 passes for 38 yards. And so he's giving you that floor. And as I mentioned, the matchup is better this coming week against the Falcons. So again, Michael Carter, one of these guys you don't necessarily feel great about. Can't feel like a huge game is incoming, even if he's getting all the carries here. But he's going to get you a floor, and he does have some value. Especially if you're missing somebody because of injuries, you might need them. But normally I go to wide receiver, the next priority position, but I cannot wait too much longer to talk about the tight end you really want to pick up if you need one, Colby Parkinson. It's almost appalling that he's barely owned in fantasy leagues. This guy continues to score touchdowns. He's in the Rams offense. He made a statement this week for sure. Like, if you didn't know who Colby Parkinson was, you got to know now. He not only scored twice, but he had arguably the best catch of the week. That touchdown where it didn't really look like he got in, but they said he got in, but whatever. I mean, that was a great catch. This guy is legit. He could actually be the next Devontae Adams because he's already been drawing a ton of red zone targets, way more than all other tight ends because he's in that Rams offense. And now, as I mentioned, Devontae Adams, if he's out, I mean, Colby Parkinson already had been on a roll. He's got 6 touchdowns in the last 6 games. And then you take out Adams and all his end zone targets. I'm not saying Parkinson's going to score 3 touchdowns next week, but would it shock you at this point? I mean, all the upside in that offense for scoring, but also it just so happens they're going to get the rematch with the Seattle Seahawks, and the Seahawks are bottom 5 against the tight ends on the season. This almost seems too easy, too good to be true. Don't question it. Grab Colby Parkinson if you need a tight end. And if you need a quarterback, I mean, again, Brissett is like the set and forget, but what if he's not out there? Look, I think for the first time in a long time, I'm going to say you don't have to worry too much if you just go with CJ Stroud. Stroud came off another nice game here, 260 yards, 3 passing touchdowns. He's just continued to get better, just like his entire team as the season has gone on. I mean, Houston now looks legit. Now, I cannot say this is risk-free because before this 3-touchdown game, CJ Stroud actually had 1 passing touchdown over the last 3 games combined, which seems insanely bad. That's an extremely low floor for fantasy. I understand that. Had some tough matchups against Denver defense, against Kansas City defense, some low-scoring games. And let's face it, this is not a dynamic passing offense. It just isn't. But they have an alpha receiver in Nico Collins who has really asserted himself late in the season. And again, this team is just rolling. They're keeping the ball, time of possession because their defense is so dominating. Look, CJ Stroud this week, it's the Raiders. All right, I don't probably need to say too much more than that. You see how pathetic the Raiders are these days and how good Texans are. They're going to have the ball a lot. They could probably put up points early here. This is such a high floor. So again, CJ Stroud is pretty much the safest option you got. If you need some help in deeper leagues, all right, here's a receiver that might be worth your time again. A.D. Mitchell, just when we had buried this Jets offense and left them for dead. And look, after the way they performed this past week, you might wonder why we're not leaving them for dead. Brady Cook, all right, 3 interceptions. We expected that. 1 touchdown. It went to A.D. Mitchell. But it wasn't just that he happened to score a touchdown. He had the most targets under new quarterback Brady Cook, 9 of them. That is significant target share. He did make that big play. You know what? We saw it before, saw glimpses of it with Tyrod Taylor. I would much prefer Tyrod Taylor to be out there, and who knows if he's coming back, but at least we've seen that he's viable with Brady Cook. And next week, the Jets do get the Saints, a much easier matchup than they had this week with the Jags. So, yeah, I think that there's still a lot of risk here to be sure. This is, as we've said, a volatile kind of boom-bust flex play, but if that's what you need, A.D. Mitchell seems like the one that has the most upside. Unless you're willing to take on a little bit of injury risk here. So let's see exactly what goes on with Luther Burden. Already talked about in the injury report. Yeah, that ankle held him out. He was questionable to return in the third quarter and didn't return. So if he does come back, we've seen Luther Burden has slowly grown into a weapon in this offense, while Roma Dunze has continued to fade. Now, of course, Burden in the last couple of weeks, he's gotten more targets because Odunze has been out, right? That's just logical. Early in the season, Burden was only playing in 11 personnel. He was that slot guy. He was still sharing snaps and time with Olamide Zaccheaus. Well, in Odunze's absence, they've moved around the field more. But again, it's just slowly, that gradual ascent. He's getting more time on the field. He's getting more targets. He's getting more trust from Ben Johnson, and he is the playmaker here. I know DJ Moore, of course, had his random outburst and scored a couple of touchdowns. He'll do that when you don't expect it. But again, with Burden, it has been kind of steady and predictable. Let's hope he's okay. If he's good to go, now I finally feel confident enough I can say I could put him in my flex. But that does also kind of depend on Roma Dunze. I mean, look, this re-aggravation here with the stress fracture in the foot, you'd think they would keep him out another week. Although Moore scored the touchdowns, Burden led the Bears with 84 receiving yards, and that's despite leaving early. Keep that in mind. So let's see how this plays out. Next week, it's a rematch with the Packers. Just a week ago, played that team. He had 67 yards. Just need those scores, those big plays, right? It could happen. And keep in mind, this is Packers defense that now looks like it's without stud Micah Parsons. All right, Endgame community, let's keep it going. Get those championships. Do what you can. Be active. I'm going to keep saying it until the season is over. Don't ever just sit and wait for things to happen. Make them happen. That means picking up the right players, of course, on the waiver wire, making those smart moves, and of course, start sit is what it's all about. You know we got you covered at every position and so much more to help you win in this week's playlist.